There is a candle with Archie and Lilibet's names on it. You can buy it. Not a private keepsake. A commercial product. Available for purchase. Connected to the As Ever brand. The children are 7 and 5 years old. They cannot read a contract, cannot negotiate terms, cannot understand intellectual property, and have not consented, and cannot meaningfully consent at their ages, to having their names and royal titles attached to an item being sold commercially to the public.
Harry is not the greatest and most intelligent bunny on the planet, and I've said this many times. And quite frankly, he very rarely engages brain before he engages mouth. And to say something like that, which to the Americans, Elvis was an icon, and he was an icon to a lot of pop rock music fans. So to say that is just absolutely ridiculous. It almost sounds like attention seeking. In the hope that somebody is going to have a go at him, that he can have a go back.
That candle is where tonight's story starts, because it is the most concrete and documented example of something that runs through the Sussex commercial operation in a way that has been building for several years and is now specific enough to examine in detail the use of Archie and Lilibet, their names, their presence, their images, their royal titles, as brand assets rather than as private individuals. Tonight, we are going through the documented commercial record, the candle, the Shop My Page feature, the domain names, the timing patterns, and what Dickie Arbiter and Duncan Larcombe, two people with decades of close proximity to this family, actually say about what they are observing. We are also going through the Geneva contradiction specifically, and what child safety experts say about the face-obscuring defense. By the end, you will have the full picture of what the documented evidence actually shows, separate from the interpretation on either side. Let's start with the commercial record, because the documented cases are more specific than the general debate usually allows. At one point, Meghan had Shop My Page enabled on her Instagram account, a feature that allows followers to click through and purchase items directly linked to what appears in a post. Clothing worn by the children appeared in posts with the Shop feature active, meaning followers viewing images of the children could click through to purchase the items they were wearing, and every purchase generated income for Meghan.
Meghan Markle just doesn't seem to understand that. If she's going to stand on this issue of internet safety, the first and foremost place that you must see this is on Meghan Markle's own Instagram page, which she refuses to do. She's trying to monetize everything, and it's impossible not to believe that Meghan Markle knows that posting her children generally gives her a bit more engagement.
The children were functioning as product placements in posts that had a direct commercial transaction attached to them. That is not a theory. It is a description of how the feature works and how it was deployed in specific posts that are part of the public record. The feature was removed after criticism circulated, but removing a feature does not remove the pattern it exemplified. The underlying approach, children's presence used in the service of commercial outcomes, continued in other forms after the feature was gone. The candle is the starkest example because it involves names rather than images, and names are harder to qualify. An image can be described as spontaneous. A product with a name on it is a deliberate commercial decision. The As Ever brand candle carrying the names Archie and Lilibet is a commercial item linked directly to the identities of two children who are 7 and 5 years old. The defense offered is that it is a family project meant to make them feel included. That framing raises a question worth sitting with. At what point does including a child in a family business cross from genuine inclusion into a territory the child cannot meaningfully consent to or understand? A 5-year-old can feel included in a kitchen. They cannot meaningfully consent to having their name on a commercial product.
This is another example, frankly, of her rank hypocrisy, going to Switzerland to talk about child safety online and then a few days later issuing pictures of her own children. It doesn't matter whether you can see their faces or not. The fact is she's using those to build her brand whilst telling the rest of us that we shouldn't use our children or you should be cautious if we did. No, I don't buy the explanation from her people, because I just think it's rank hypocrisy.
The domain names add another dimension. The Sussex household registered domain names associated with their children before the children were old enough for school. That is a commercial act with a specific logic. You register a domain name because you anticipate it having commercial value, and you want to control that value rather than allow someone else to claim it first. Registering commercial domains for children who are not yet in school is a decision made by adults for reasons that are clearly commercial rather than parental in the protective sense. If Palace Insider is giving you the full picture that other channels skip, the like button costs nothing and it keeps this channel going. Now let's talk about Dicky Arbiter, because his perspective on this is specific and comes from a position that most commentators cannot match, and because the words he chooses matter. Arbiter spent 5 years working directly with Princess Diana, as press secretary, managing her public appearances, navigating her communications during one of the most intensively covered periods of any royal figure in recent history, and being present for some of the most significant and most difficult moments of that period, both publicly and privately.
If you're so concerned about the anonymity of your children, don't photograph them and don't put them online. And if you want to photograph them, put them in an album, keep them on your phone, keep them on your computer, but don't put them online. It's no good putting them online and then expecting anonymity, because it just ain't going to happen.
He was present for the births of William and Harry. He watched Diana navigate the question of raising children in the full public eye under genuine and sustained institutional pressure. Diana had a clear principle about her children, and it was not theoretical. She wanted them to have as ordinary a childhood as she could possibly provide. The theme parks, the fast food trips, the visits to ordinary places that had nothing to do with the palace. These were deliberate choices rather than casual ones. Amid the enormous and relentless spotlight on her own story, she consistently and actively guarded their privacy. That commitment produced visible outcomes. The warmth and relatability that William and Harry carried into public life came from somewhere specific, and that somewhere was being allowed to be children before they were required to be anything else.
Meghan and Harry own their kids' names. They own the domain names, they own the emails, they own everything else. When turning Archwell Foundation into Archwell Philanthropies, they said it was for a family thing so that their children could be involved.
Arbiter's characterization of what he currently observes is specific enough to quote. The word he uses is ruthlessly, not carelessly, not incidentally, not accidentally, ruthlessly, with full awareness of what each decision means and what outcomes it serves. That word from that person, with that background, carries weight that goes beyond tabloid criticism. It is an assessment derived from professional experience of what responsible royal child privacy looks like and what the current practice looks like by comparison. It is also a different order of statement from general social media commentary or tabloid criticism. Arbiter is not a hostile observer constructing accusations from outside. He is someone who knows what the alternative model looks like in practice because he was part of building and delivering it, and he is saying directly that the current model does not resemble that alternative in ways that he finds deeply concerning. Duncan Larcombe has covered this family for decades and knows Harry in person. His specific observation is about timing. He has noted that the children's appearances in public content follow a pattern that does not look like spontaneous parental sharing.
She'll use her children ruthlessly, just like she's used her husband incredibly ruthlessly, and the royal family ruthlessly, to build her brand, build her image, get her truth across.
They intensify after negative coverage. They appear at commercial launch moments. They coincide with strategic points in the brand cycle. When the A's Ever brand has needed emotional warmth that product shots alone cannot generate, the children have appeared in domestic scenes. When negative press has needed to be countered, birthday tributes have appeared. When Harry received solo positive coverage that did not mention Meghan, Meghan posted within hours featuring their daughter. No single instance proves a deliberate strategy. The pattern across multiple instances, over multiple years, across multiple commercial cycles is harder to explain as coincidence. Larcombe's description of it as a content calendar rather than a family album is the language of someone who has spent decades observing how celebrity and royal content strategy actually works, and who is describing what he observes as fitting the strategy model rather than the spontaneous sharing model. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you never miss what we cover next, and drop your take in the comments below. Where do you think the line is between family sharing and commercial deployment? Duncan Larcombe, who has covered this family for decades and has met Harry in person, makes a similar observation from a different angle. His point is about timing. He notes that the children's appearances in public content follow a specific pattern. They intensify after negative coverage. They appear at product launch moments. They coincide with strategic points in the commercial cycle. That is not the pattern of a parent sharing spontaneous family moments. That is a content calendar. The pattern is visible enough to be specific. When the As Ever brand has needed emotional warmth, the children have appeared in domestic kitchen scenes, where their presence gives the content and authenticity that product shots alone cannot provide. When negative press has needed to be countered with something softer, birthday tributes and family glimpses have appeared. When Harry received the Time magazine recognition that did not mention Meghan posted to Instagram within hours, featuring a photograph of their daughter. No single instance of this pattern proves a deliberate strategy.
When Meghan was growing up, she dreamed of Hollywood stardom and being a big person on a big stage. When Harry was growing up, he dreamed of being anonymous and not recognized ever he goes. The reality is, and it's painful to watch it from someone that's dealt with Harry since he was a teenager. Meghan is living her dream. Harry is living his nightmare.
The accumulated pattern across multiple instances, over multiple years, across multiple commercial cycles, is harder to explain as coincidence. Now, let's be specific about the Geneva dimension, because the contradiction between the WHO speech and the documented posting pattern is the most visible and most widely discussed expression of the broader question this story is working through. Meghan's speech in Geneva was about protecting children from the specific harms that come with algorithmic exposure online. She described the mechanisms, the relentless algorithmic attention, the engagement loops that are designed to maximize time on platform regardless of what that does to the viewer, the commercial exploitation of children's presence on platforms built around capturing and holding attention. The speech was well constructed. The cause it identified is real, and both of those things are simultaneously true. Child safety in the digital space is a genuine and serious policy area, and the WHO stage was an appropriate place to address it. The contradiction that critics have raised is not whether the cause is important. It is whether the person on the stage has a consistent relationship with the principles they are advocating, and whether consistency matters for advocacy effectiveness. Her team's defense of the children's appearances in posts rests on the argument that the children's faces are obscured or only partially visible, and therefore, the protection principle is being honored. Multiple experts have challenged that framing on two specific grounds. The first is that face obscuring does not obscure presence or prevent the building of a digital footprint. A child whose birthday is shared publicly, whose home setting and domestic environment are visible in posts, whose parents' commercial cycle they appear in regularly, whose name is on commercial products available for sale, and whose clothing was previously linked to purchase pages, is not functionally private regardless of whether their face is fully visible or partially out of frame. The algorithmic exposure Meghan described in Geneva as dangerous is not primarily about facial recognition technology. It is about the accumulation of a digital footprint, the building of a public identity around a person who has not chosen to have one. A partially hidden face does not prevent a digital footprint from being built around a child. The second point comes directly from child safety professionals, and it is counterintuitive but documented. Partial visibility can increase rather than decrease unwanted attention from concerning individuals. A partly visible child, shown from behind, with a face out of frame in ways that suggest there is more to see, generates specific kinds of attention that full transparency might not. The mystery element, in certain cases and for certain kinds of problematic attention, can be a draw rather than a deterrent. The argument that face obscuring is equivalent to privacy protection is not uniformly supported by child safety research, and some experts have specifically noted this in the context of how the Sussex approach works. The consent question connects to this. Commercial use of a child's name, image, or royal title, the candle, the domain names, the shopping links, involves a minor who cannot meaningfully consent to commercial exploitation of their identity. Most jurisdictions have developed specific protections around the commercial use of minors' likenesses and identities for exactly this reason. Children lack the legal and cognitive capacity to meaningfully consent, which is why adults are not allowed to deploy children's identities commercially without appropriate oversight. Whether the specific Sussex commercial decisions fall within or outside those protections is a legal question. That the question exists and has not been publicly addressed is itself notable. Larcombe's observation about Harry's position in all of this is the part that sits most uncomfortably, because Harry has built a significant part of his public identity around specific convictions about exploitation and privacy. Harry has been the most vocal and most public critic of media exploitation of private individuals. of families being commercialized without their knowledge or consent, of press intrusion into children's lives, of the systems that he argues prioritized institutional reputation over the well-being of individuals, including himself as a child. He articulates these positions with evident conviction. The memoir, the legal cases, the public interviews, all of them rest on a foundation of stated belief in privacy, in the protection of children from exploitation, in accountability for those who deploy private individuals without their consent. And yet, the candle is on sale. The domain names are registered. The Shop My Page feature was active. The timing pattern that Larcombe describes as a content calendar is visible in the public record. Larcombe's point is not that Harry is enthusiastically driving any of this. His point is that Harry is not stopping it, and that a man who holds Harry's stated convictions about exploitation and privacy, and who genuinely holds those convictions rather than holding them performatively, would be expected to draw a specific and visible line that has not been drawn. That observation is uncomfortable. It is also fair in the specific sense that a person's convictions about exploitation of children are most meaningfully tested by what they allow to happen to their own children when commercial incentives point in a different direction. The commercial logic that runs through the Sussex operation is worth being direct about, because it explains the incentive structure regardless of what any individual decision was intended to achieve. Meghan's most commercially successful content and projects have all involved the royal connection in a direct and central way. The Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary generated 81.6 million hours of viewing in its first week because it was about a royal departure. The title, the institution, the crisis. The content that has not centered on the royal connection has performed dramatically less well, as the 2025 cooking show's viewing figures demonstrate. Archie and Lilibet are the most personal and most permanent form of the royal connection that remains available to the Sussex commercial operation as content and brand elements. They are the children of a Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Archie is seventh in line to the throne. Lilibet carries the name of the late Queen. They are not simply a young couple's children in the way that most children are simply their parents' children. They are the ongoing and permanent evidence of a specific institutional connection that the commercial operation depends on. That commercial reality does not prove that the children are being deliberately exploited. It means that the incentive structure points toward more of their presence in the content rather than less, and that the financial and commercial pressure runs in that direction, regardless of the intentions behind any individual post. Whether that incentive is being consciously followed or simply producing its natural effect as the path of least resistance is a question only the people making the daily decisions can answer honestly. What the outside observer can document is the outcome. The pattern of deployment that Arbiter describes with the word ruthlessly, and that Larcombe describes as a content calendar rather than a family album. The Diana comparison matters as a practical framework rather than as sentiment. Diana's model produced visible and lasting outcomes, children who grew into adults with genuine public warmth and relatability. That outcome was not accidental, and it was not the product of anything mysterious. It was the product of a specific and deliberate approach to keeping them ordinary, private, and human first, while they were young enough for that protection to shape who they became rather than being shaped by the commercial apparatus surrounding their parents. The current model is different in a specific and documentable way, not because sharing family moments is wrong. Diana shared family moments throughout her children's childhood, and no serious observer argues otherwise. The difference is that the moments being shared are attached to a commercial infrastructure in ways that Diana's were not, and the children's names, titles, and identities have been registered and deployed as brand assets in ways that go meaningfully beyond family sharing into something that has a different name and a different set of implications. The timing pattern that Larcombe describes as a content calendar is documented across enough instances to be observable by anyone who has been following the Sussex commercial cycle closely. It is worth going through it specifically rather than generally. When the As Ever brand has launched products or needed commercial momentum, family content has appeared. When negative coverage has needed to be countered with something emotionally warmer, birthday tributes and domestic glimpses have followed. When the Archie Foundation's financial difficulties became public knowledge, the children appeared in promotional video content for the first time in ways that previous Sussex content had avoided. When Harry received solo positive coverage from Time magazine that did not mention Meghan, Meghan posted to Instagram within hours featuring their daughter and a romantic image of herself and Harry. The defenders of this pattern argue that parents routinely share family moments, that the timing is coincidental, and that reading a commercial strategy into personal posts assumes a level of calculation that is unfair to apply. Those are reasonable counterarguments. The problem with them is that the pattern is consistent enough across enough instances that coincidence becomes an increasingly demanding explanation. 4 instances of the same timing correlation can be coincidence. 10 instances across several years is harder to explain as coincidence and easier to describe as a pattern. Larcombe's content calendar framing says the same thing differently. When you observe that children appear in content reliably at specific types of moments, commercial launches, reputation repair cycles, solo partner coverage, and when you observe that the appearances increase in frequency as other brand assets perform less well, you are observing the behavior of a content calendar. The question is not whether that description is harsh. The question is whether it is accurate. Now let's bring everything together, because the argument is really about one specific question underneath all the specifics. The question is not whether parents can share photographs of their children. They can, and no one arguing this position is saying they cannot. The question is not whether the children are loved. They are. The question is not whether Meghan genuinely cares about online child safety. She may genuinely hold those convictions while also deploying her children commercially, and those two things can simultaneously be true without either canceling the other. The question is whether the documented commercial deployment of these specific children, their names on products, their images linked to purchase pages, their titles registered as domain names, their presence strategically deployed in the brand's commercial cycle, constitutes something different from family sharing. And whether, when a person who advocates publicly for child digital safety has a documented pattern of commercial child deployment that experts describe as inconsistent with the principles they are advocating, the advocacy is undermined. The advocacy itself loses credibility and effectiveness when the person making it cannot maintain basic consistency between stated principle and the observable practice documented in their own public record. That is not primarily a problem for Meghan's reputation as an individual public figure. It is a problem for the cause itself, because child digital safety is a serious and genuinely urgent policy area that requires serious, credible advocates capable of speaking to legislators, technology companies, and parents with sustained authority. When the most prominent celebrity face of that advocacy is subject to documented and specific criticism about their own practice, the cause becomes easier for the industry to dismiss. That is Arbiter's real concern, expressed through the word ruthlessly. And it is Larcombe's real concern, expressed through the content calendar framing. Both of them are describing the same underlying observation from their respective positions of professional experience, that the children's presence in the Sussex commercial operation is not incidental to it. It is structural. It runs through the candle and the domain names and the Shop My Page feature and the timing pattern. Whether you think that crosses a line is a question only you can answer after looking at the full record. The line sits in different places for different people, and both those who defend the Sussex approach and those who criticize it are applying their own genuine sense of where a reasonable boundary belongs. What this story has tried to provide is the documented basis for that judgment, rather than the judgment itself. The candle, the domain names, the Shop My Page feature, the timing pattern, the words of people who have professional experience of what the alternative looks like. The Newsweek defense article is itself a data point. If the contradiction between the Geneva speech and the posting pattern felt comfortable rather than uncomfortable, it would not have required a prepared, lawyer-reviewed statement to manage. The fact that it required that kind of careful management is an acknowledgement, however indirect, that the tension is real and that it was expected to land publicly. And 18 days after the Geneva speech, the birthday photograph of Lilibet went up. The cycle continued. Drop your honest take in the comments below. Where do you place the line between family sharing and commercial deployment? And has the documented record here changed where you draw it? Subscribe to Palace Insider so you never miss what we cover next. And the like button is how this channel keeps doing this kind of documented specific analysis rather than the general version. We will see you for the next one.